And none of it was true. Not the hacking of the DNC, not the Alpha Bank, not any of the Steele dossier. I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he was nothing but a washed up spy who hadn't had contacts in Russia for years by the time that he published that pile of lies. It's incredible.
We're about to have a look at a heated debate between Scott Horton and Christopher Steele. And yes, it is the same Christopher Steele known for authoring the whole Steele dossier that Democrats used against Donald Trump when he won in the 2016 election that ended up in this whole Russian collusion hoax, which led to the waste of nearly $50 million being spent in the whole Russian collusion investigation led up by Robert Mueller. And we now know that the Steele dossier is bogus. Inspector General Michael Horowitz drove a stake through its heart after finding that the Steele dossier was compiled of hearsay and third-hand gossip. And the only verified information that Horowitz found was openly available on the internet. But let's get into this debate because Scott Horton is about to dismantle and destroy Christopher Steele to his face, and it's glorious.
But look, let's be blunt. You know, your dossier caused a firestorm, obviously, when it came out. It was funded by Hillary Clinton Democrats and other political opponents of Trump, leaked by BuzzFeed News just before he was sworn in as president for maximum potential damage. And, you know, as you know, because you penned it, it contained a number of incendiary allegations, not least of which the one that the Russians may have held blackmail video of Trump engaged in, very unsavory activity with prostitutes and so on, which he's emphatically denied and for which no other evidence has ever emerged. Do you accept, Christopher Steele, that you're part of the problem here in the credibility that people attach to anything linking Trump and Putin, because so much of that dossier to this day remains unproven and much of it has been widely discredited?
I don't believe it has been widely discredited. I would agree that some of it's been unproven. I mean, when you dig into the real detail of this, if you look at the Mueller report, for example, and we're going to go down into the detail a little bit here, there was an exchange of emails between somebody called Rusteladze, who was working in Moscow for Agalarov, and Michael Cohen in, I think, October 2016, in which they talked about sex tapes, frankly, and about the need to suppress them. So I think there's more to this, Piers. If you actually look down into all the detail of the Senate report that was published, which deals particularly with Manafort and Kilimnik, and the Mueller report, as I say, which contains details, and you go back into things like the Sunny Isles deal and the Trump Tower deal and so on, there's a lot of here that isn't really understood and isn't played up. And one of the issues with the whole collusion thing is that collusion is not a criminal offence. And many of the investigations, particularly the Mueller investigation, were simply looking for criminal evidence, for criminal prosecutions, and not at the wider intelligence picture.
All right, Scott Horton, I can see you shaking your head, and I think I saw a bit of eye rolling. So your response to that?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, the reason for Trump's policy goes to what Mr. Scaramucci said. It was Henry Kissinger's advice to recreate the Russian Sino split. If they're getting too close together, we want to split the weaker off from the stronger, just the way Kissinger did with Nixon in the early 70s. Making a treaty with China. So Trump even had said that, yeah, Henry Kissinger told me I'm so smart because that's what I think that we ought to do. So this was a recognition that Russia is part of Europe and part of, greater Christendom and the West, even if the eastern frontier of it, and that we want to keep them moving towards us, which had nominally been American policy since the end of the Cold War. Even if very badly practiced, that's what they said that they were trying to do. And so that is Trump's motive here. And if it hadn't have been for Mr. Steele and his cohorts that pushed the Russiagate hoax back in 2016, then Trump would have been able to solve the problem in Ukraine then. Remember, the FBI told CNN after the plan to depose Trump through the 25th Amendment had fallen through, if you could believe that, they said, well, at least we can still rein him in on Russia policy by launching this special counsel investigation, keeping the hoax going, preventing him from implementing his policy. To this day, he brags, I'm the one who sent the Javelin missiles, as he did then, because this is his body armor against the accusation that he's kowtowing to Putin. And his son even said, oh yeah, how can we bomb Assad then in Syria? If we're in the thrall of Vladimir Putin, this kind of thing. So it affected Donald Trump's foreign policy in his first term, absolutely for the worst. Because as you said, Pierce, the conflict had started back in 2014 after the loss of Crimea and then the launch of the war in the Donbass. And so there was a Minsk II peace deal, but it had not been implemented. And Trump's government, I don't know if Trump knows this or not, but his ambassador, Adam Taylor, told Ukraine not to implement the German proposal to try again to implement the Minsk II deal and put an end to the conflict in 2019. And so there's that part of it. On the details of the Steele dossier and all this stuff, I mean, you got to be kidding me. I have 75 pages in my book. I hope you're enjoying it, Pierce.
I am. I've got it here. Bravo.
Oh, dude.
Here it is. There's a little plug for you. How Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine by Scott Horton. A big, meaty tome.
Yes, well, I hope you're enjoying it. I do have 75 pages on Russiagate in the end, including a section on the Steele dossier there. And everything that he said about Manafort and Page and all of these people in the Trump campaign were absolute lies. In fact, an FBI lawyer even was convicted for censoring the CIA memo to the FBI saying Page works for us as not an agent, but an asset, a loyal American patriot who always debriefed the CIA anytime he met with an important Russian businessman or government official. And this liar framed him essentially for treason. And by the way, his primary sources were a Russian named Danchenko, who had been under investigation for being a Russian spy in the past. And the only reason they had dropped is because they mistakenly thought he left the country. And then his partner, an American named Dolan, who actually was a registered agent of Russia. And they were the two primary sources who made up all those lies that you and I just recited, Pierce, that made it into Steele's dossier that they use. And none of it was true. Not the hacking of the DNC, not the Alpha Bank, not any of the Steele dossier. I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he was nothing but a washed up spy who hadn't had contacts in Russia for years by the time that he published that pile of lies. It's incredible.
Well, I think out of fairness, I should go back to you, Christopher Steele, briefly. What's your response? Nothing but a pile of lies.
I've never lied about any of this, of course, and it's been tested in court many times. As you'll be aware, I've been involved in several high court trials involved in this and have won them all. So I don't think there's any basis upon which to think that we were deliberately lying or misleading anybody. And in fact, of course, the dossier wasn't meant to be made public at all. So I think that is going down the wrong path. In terms of our source base in Russia, obviously we don't talk about that. But I've made a successful business over the last 15 years over running sources in Russia and China and other places, producing intelligence to meet high standards of corporate requirements. So I think the idea that, I'm out there lying and making stuff up is ludicrous. Of course, intelligence isn't always entirely accurate. Intelligence reflects the sources, reflects their motivations, reflects their access. And of course, even in a system like Russia, you have people being dishonest with each other. If you sat in a room when Putin was talking to Shoigu about the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine, you may well not be listening to the truth, but you're listening to a truth, which is upon which Putin makes his policy decisions. And a lot of the conflict in Ukraine as it's unfolded and Putin's conduct of it has been based, I would argue, on distorted information being passed up the command chain to him and telling him things he wants to hear.
So we just heard Christopher Steele admit that he didn't think that his dossier would ever be shown publicly. And I'm willing to believe that he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win that election and then bury the whole Steele dossier, which then they would go and do to Trump what they've done to him over the past 8 years, keeping him in courts and battling him using lawfare against their political opponents, rather than just having good policies that the American people can decide to vote for or vote against. The Democrats always have to try to vilify their opponent rather than propping up themselves and saying, hey, look how good we are because we are principled and we are serving the American people. No, it's always our opponent is some type of ist or phobe or working with Russia. And now Christopher Steele, who is a former MI6 agent, is not only making himself look even worse by coming on and showing his face on Piers Morgan Uncensored, he's also making the whole agency of MI6 look even worse than they already do with all the things that they've covered up in their history. Regardless, I don't understand how this isn't some type of foreign election interference from Europe based on the Steele dossier in that he was trying to help get Hillary Clinton elected. So look, once again, it's rules for thee, but not for me, and it's always coming from the Democratic Party, or at least it seems to be from my perspective. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, share this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.